On the afternoon of Wednesday, July 16th, in one of the wildest and most remote regions of North America, our planet decided to stir. At 12:37 p.m. local time, a powerful earthquake with a magnitude of 7.3 struck the floor of the Pacific Ocean. Its epicenter was shallow, only about 20 kilometers deep, and located approximately 88 kilometers south of the small community of Sandpoint on the Alaskan Peninsula. For about 30 seconds, the ground shook violently, and then, just minutes after the shaking subsided, another, more ominous sound cut through the quiet afternoon: the wailing of sirens. A tsunami warning had been issued. Welcome back to Science for Sleep. If this journey to explore the hidden powers of our planet sparks your curiosity, a gentle tap of the like and subscribe buttons will help us continue these voyages together. And as always, I would love to know where you are listening from in the world. Please feel free to leave a greeting in the comments. Tonight, we will not focus on the panic of a news bulletin. Instead, we will be explorers, seeking the answers to those very questions. This is the story of the grand dance of tectonic plates, of the terrifying power that is unleashed, and of the incredible human ingenuity that has learned to listen to and predict the planet's fury. Let us begin. To understand the violent shaking of the ground in a quiet Alaskan town, we must zoom out. We must pull our perspective away from a single event on a single day and look at the Earth not as a solid, stable sphere, but as a living, breathing planet with a restless heart and a fractured skin. The earthquake of July 16th was not an isolated incident. It was a single, momentary tremor in a vast and ancient story of geological violence, a story that is constantly being written along a great, fiery seam that encircles the Pacific Ocean. This is the Pacific Ring of Fire. It is not a ring of literal fire, but its name is well earned. It is a colossal, horseshoe-shaped path, stretching for 40 kilometers, running up the western coast of the Americas, across the remote Aleutian Islands of Alaska, down through Japan, the Philippines, and Indonesia, and into the South Pacific. Along this great arc, more than 75% of the world's active and dormant volcanoes are found, and approximately 90% of the world's earthquakes, including most of the largest and most powerful, occur here. It is the most geologically dynamic and volatile region on the face of the planet. The Ring of Fire is not a random feature. It is a direct and beautiful expression of the most powerful force that shapes our world, plate tectonics. The Earth's outer shell, the lithosphere, is not a single, unbroken piece. It is fractured into about a dozen major tectonic plates, immense slabs of rock that float upon the hot, semi-molten mantle beneath them. These plates are in constant, slow-motion collision. They drift at a speed of only a few centimeters per year, the same speed at which your fingernails grow, but over millions of years, this patient movement has the power to raise mountains, create oceans, and trigger cataclysms. The Ring of Fire marks the boundaries where these great plates meet, and in most of these places, the plates are not gently sliding past each other. They are colliding head-on. Along the entire length of the ring, the dense oceanic crust of the Great Pacific Plate is being forced to dive, or subduct, beneath the lighter continental plates that surround it. It is a slow, powerful, and unimaginably violent process. As the oceanic plate grinds its way down into the Earth's mantle, the immense friction and heat cause the rock to melt, creating magma that then rises to the surface to feed the great volcanoes that define the ring. This is why Japan has its iconic Mount Fuji, why the Andes Mountains are lined with volcanic peaks, and why the state of Alaska is home to more than 40 active volcanoes. They are all the fiery children of this great subduction zone. The constant, grinding pressure between these plates is also what builds up the immense stress that is eventually released in the form of earthquakes. The Ring of Fire is not just a place, it is a process. It is the place where the Earth's crust is actively being recycled, where new land is being created by volcanoes, and old seafloor is being consumed back into the mantle. It is a zone of constant creation and destruction, a testament to a planet that is always remaking itself from the inside out. And Alaska sits on one of its most active and dramatic sections, a place where the power of this great geological engine is on full display. The Great Ring of Fire is not a single, uniform boundary. It is a complex mosaic of different tectonic interactions. And in the vast, cold waters of the North Pacific, off the coast of Alaska, one of the most powerful and dramatic of these interactions is playing out in geological slow motion. This is the story of two colossal plates, two pieces of the Earth's crust, the size of continents, engaged in a slow, grinding, and ultimately violent dance. This is the Dance of Subduction. Our first dancer is the immense Pacific Plate. It is a plate of dense, heavy oceanic crust, born from volcanic activity at mid-ocean ridges, and it has been traveling northwest across the globe for millions of years. Our second dancer is the North American Plate, a lighter, more buoyant plate made of continental crust. Here, in the Gulf of Alaska and along the Aleutian Islands, these two giants meet. But this is not a gentle meeting. The heavier Pacific Plate is being forced to dive, to plunge, deep into the Earth's mantle beneath the lighter North American Plate. Imagine two immense, impossibly heavy carpets being pushed towards each other. One, the oceanic plate, is thin but dense. The other, the continental plate, is thick but lighter. As they meet, the denser carpet cannot ride up and over. It has no choice but to bend and slide underneath, beginning a long, slow descent back into the fiery interior of the planet from which it was once born. This is subduction. It is the Earth's great recycling process, a fundamental mechanism that shapes continents, creates volcanoes, and generates the most powerful earthquakes on the planet. This process is not smooth. The two plates are not gliding past each other on a well-oiled track. They are two rough, jagged, and colossal surfaces, grinding against one another with unimaginable friction and pressure. As the Pacific Plate descends, it scrapes and drags against the overriding North American Plate. For long periods, sometimes for decades or even centuries, the plates become locked together. They get stuck. But the great forces of plate tectonics do not stop. The rest of the Pacific Plate continues to push forward, while the stuck section holds fast. The energy that should be released through steady movement is instead stored, building up year after year, like the slow, silent winding of a colossal spring. The crust of the North American Plate is being bent downwards and compressed, deformed by a strain that is invisible on the surface but immense in its power. And it is this slow, silent accumulation of stress, this great geological inhalation, that sets the stage for the sudden, violent exhalation that is a megaquake. The Dance of Subduction is a patient one, but its rhythm is punctuated by moments of terrifying release. The slow, powerful dance of subduction, this grinding of continents, is not an invisible process. It leaves behind a great and dramatic scar on the face of the planet, a feature so immense it is clearly visible from space. This is the Aleutian Trench. It is the physical, topographical expression of the boundary where the Pacific Plate begins its final descent into the Earth's mantle. The trench is a vast arc-shaped abyss in the seafloor, stretching for over 500 kilometers across the North Pacific, from the Gulf of Alaska to the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia. Imagine standing on the edge of a canyon. Now, imagine that canyon is over 7 kilometers deep at its lowest point, and so long that it could stretch from New York City to Los Angeles. This is the scale of the Aleutian Trench. It is one of the deepest parts of the world's oceans, a place of profound darkness, immense pressure, and eternal cold. It is the deep crease in the Earth's crust, the line where the planet's skin has buckled under the strain of a collision that has been happening for millions of years. This great trench is not empty. It is flanked by one of the most spectacular volcanic chains on Earth, the Aleutian Islands. These islands are not random formations. They are the direct children of the subduction happening in the trench below. As the Pacific Plate plunges deeper into the mantle, the immense heat and pressure cause water trapped in the oceanic crust to be released. This water rises into the overlying mantle rock, lowering its melting point and creating pockets of magma. This magma, being less dense than the surrounding rock, then rises to the surface, erupting to form the long curved chain of volcanic islands that perfectly mirrors the shape of the trench. The Aleutian Arc is a testament to the creative power of this destructive process. It is a string of more than 50 active and dormant volcanoes, rising from the sea, their snowy peaks often shrouded in mist. They are the fiery breath of the subducting plate, a constant reminder of the immense geological engine at work just below the waves. The trench and the volcanic arc are two sides of the same coin, a story of descent and ascent, of a plate being consumed and a new world being born from its sacrifice. The recent earthquake near Sand Point was just one more momentary shudder in this ancient and ongoing process, a brief release of the tension that builds, inevitably, along this great, submerged scar. The Great Aleutian Trench is the visible evidence of the collision, a deep scar on the ocean floor. But the true drama, the source of the immense power of an earthquake, is an invisible process of tension and strain that builds silently over decades and centuries. The two great tectonic plates, the Pacific and the North American, are not smooth, polished surfaces gliding effortlessly past one another. They are rough, jagged, and colossal slabs of rock, and their interaction is dominated by immense friction. As the Pacific plate descends into the mantle, its upper surface grinds against the overriding North American plate. In many places along this vast subduction zone, the friction is so great that the two plates become locked together. Imagine two giant pieces of sandpaper being pressed against each other with unimaginable force. They get stuck, but the great engine of plate tectonics, deep within the earth, does not stop. The rest of the Pacific plate continues its slow, relentless northwestward push, a few centimeters every year. This creates a profound paradox. The deeper part of the plate continues to descend, while the upper, locked section holds fast. The result is that the overriding North American plate begins to deform. It is bent, compressed, and warped by the immense, accumulating strain. We can use a simple, gentle analogy to understand this. Imagine taking a long, flexible stick and holding one end firm while you slowly push the other end forward. For a long time, the stick does not break. It bends, storing the energy of your push within its structure as elastic potential energy. The further you push, the more it bends, and the more energy it stores. The crust of southern Alaska is this stick. Over decades, it is slowly being bent and squeezed by the locked Pacific plate beneath it. The land is being subtly compressed and uplifted, storing an amount of energy that is difficult to comprehend. This process is completely silent. There are no warning signs on the surface. Life goes on as normal. The forests grow, the rivers flow, and the mountains stand still. But deep below, in the locked zone of the fault, the tension is building relentlessly, year after year. The great geological spring is being wound tighter and tighter, waiting for the moment when the friction that holds the plates together is finally overcome by the immense strain that is trying to pull them apart. This slow, silent accumulation of pressure is the true source of an earthquake's power. It is the quiet inhalation before the planet's violent, sudden exhalation. For decades, perhaps for more than a century, the great geological spring had been wound tighter and tighter. Deep beneath the cold waters of the North Pacific, the immense friction between the two great plates held fast, a silent and stubborn refusal to yield. The stored energy, the elastic strain in the bent and compressed rock of the North American plate, grew to a level that is difficult to express in human terms. It was the energy of thousands of nuclear weapons, held in a state of perfect, silent tension. But nothing in geology, no matter how strong, can hold back the relentless push of a continent forever. Eventually, a breaking point is reached. This is the moment of rupture. At a single, specific point on the vast, locked fault, perhaps a place where the friction was slightly weaker or the stress had become most concentrated, the rock finally fails. The friction that had held the plates together for so long is overcome in an instant. The stick that had been slowly bending for a century finally snaps back. In a fraction of a second, the stored elastic energy is released in a sudden, violent, and catastrophic release. The two sides of the fault, which had been stuck fast, lurch past each other in a single brutal movement. The overriding North American plate, which had been dragged down and compressed, rebounds upwards and outwards, snapping back into a less strained position. This sudden movement, this lurching of a section of the Earth's crust that could be hundreds of kilometers long, displaces an unimaginable amount of rock and water. And the colossal energy stored within that rock is released, not as heat or light, but as vibration. This is the birth of the earthquake. The energy radiates outwards from its point of origin, the hypocenter, in the form of seismic waves. Powerful ripples traveling through the very body of the planet. The first of these waves to arrive are the P waves, or primary waves. They are compressional waves, much like sound waves, that travel by pushing and pulling the rock in the direction they are moving. They are the fastest of all seismic waves, racing through the Earth's crust at several kilometers per second. They are the first, often subtle, jolt of an earthquake, the initial tremor that signals the arrival of the main event. Following closely behind are the S waves, or secondary waves. These are shearing waves, which move the rock up and down or side to side, perpendicular to the direction of travel. They are slower than P waves but are often much more destructive, carrying a greater amplitude of motion. It is the arrival of the S waves that causes the violent, rolling, and shaking ground motion that we associate with a powerful earthquake. On July 16th, it was these waves, born from the sudden rupture deep beneath the ocean floor, that traveled outwards, reaching the communities along the Alaskan peninsula. For 30 seconds, the solid ground became a fluid, unstable surface. The energy that had been silently accumulating for a century was finally released in a brief, violent, and awesome display of the planet's internal power. The great geological spring had finally unwound. The 30 seconds of violent shaking on July 16th was a powerful and unsettling event, a stark reminder of the immense forces at play beneath the Alaskan coast. But to truly understand why every siren, every warning, and every evacuation order in this part of the world is treated with such profound seriousness, we must look back in time. We must visit a day that is seared into the geological and cultural memory of Alaska, a day when the planet unleashed a level of power that dwarfs almost any other event in recorded human history. This is the story of the Great Alaskan Earthquake of 1964. It happened on Good Friday, March 27th. At 5:36 p.m., as Alaskans were preparing for their evening, the ground began to shake. This was no ordinary tremor. This was a megathrust earthquake, and it would become the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in North American history, and the second most powerful ever recorded worldwide, with a magnitude of 9.2. The recent earthquake lasted for 30 seconds. The shaking in 1964 continued for nearly 5 full minutes. Imagine that, 5 minutes of the solid earth, behaving like a violent, churning ocean. The ground rose and fell in great waves, some reportedly several meters high. Great fissures ripped open the land, swallowing cars and houses. In the city of Anchorage, the shaking triggered a phenomenon known as liquefaction, where the solid, clay-rich ground momentarily behaved like a liquid. Entire neighborhoods slid towards the sea. Houses were torn in half. Streets dropped by more than 10 meters in an instant. The coastal town of Valdez was hit by a massive underwater landslide, which destroyed its port and generated a local tsunami that swept away what was left of the waterfront. This was a different kind of rupture than the one that occurred recently. This was the failure of a colossal section of the locked subduction zone, an area nearly 900 kilometers long. In those few minutes, the North American plate, which had been compressed for centuries, rebounded upwards by as much as 9 meters in some places, while other areas subsided by over 2 meters. This immense and sudden displacement of the seafloor was the perfect recipe for a catastrophic tsunami. The earthquake generated not just one, but a series of devastating waves. The first were local tsunamis, created by the numerous underwater landslides, triggered by the shaking. These waves were incredibly fast and incredibly high, striking nearby communities like Whittier and Seward with little to no warning, wiping out entire harbors and industrial areas. But the main, tectonic tsunami was even larger in scale. It was a wave that radiated outwards across the entire Pacific Ocean. It devastated the coast of British Columbia in Canada and traveled all the way down the west coast of the United States, causing significant damage in Oregon and California. It even reached Hawaii and Japan. The Great Alaskan Earthquake of 1964 was a lesson written in devastation. It revealed the true upper limit of the power that the Aleutian subduction zone is capable of unleashing. And it is this memory, this horrifying precedent, that guides every action and every decision made by the scientists at the tsunami warning centers today. When the ground shakes in Alaska, they are not just reacting to the data on their screens, they are reacting to the ghosts of 1964, ensuring that the lessons learned from that terrible day are never, ever forgotten. The violent shaking of the ground during a great subduction zone earthquake is only the first expression of the planet's power. The true, far-reaching danger is born not from the shaking itself, but from the immense and sudden movement of the seafloor. It is in this moment of geological upheaval that a tsunami, a wave of almost unimaginable scale and energy, can be created. The process begins with the vertical displacement of the crust. During the earthquake, as the overriding North American plate snaps back upwards after being dragged down for centuries, it displaces a colossal volume of the ocean above it. Imagine lying a large, heavy rug flat on the floor. Now, from underneath, push your hand upwards. You will create a large, gentle mound in the rug. This is precisely what happens to the ocean during a megathrust earthquake. A vast section of the seafloor, potentially thousands of square kilometers in area, is suddenly thrust upwards by several meters. This movement lifts the entire column of water that sits above it, from the very bottom of the sea to the surface. It is not just the surface water that moves, it is the entire ocean depth, a mass of water weighing trillions of tons, that is lifted into a great, low, and incredibly wide mound on the ocean's surface. But this mound of water cannot remain elevated. Gravity, the great equalizer, immediately begins to pull it back down. And as this immense mass of water collapses, its potential energy is converted into kinetic energy. It does not simply settle back into place. The energy radiates outwards from the epicenter in all directions, creating a series of incredibly long, powerful waves. This is a tsunami. In the deep, open ocean, a tsunami is a strange and deceptive creature. It does not look like the towering, breaking waves we see in movies. Its wavelength, the distance from one crest to the next, can be hundreds of kilometers long, and its amplitude, its height, is often no more than a meter. A ship in the deep ocean could be lifted by a passing tsunami, and its crew would likely not even notice the gentle, long swell. But it is traveling with incredible speed, often as fast as a commercial jet airplane, carrying an immense amount of energy across the entire ocean basin. The true transformation happens as this wave approaches the coast. As the ocean becomes shallower, the energy that was once distributed throughout the entire depth of the water column begins to be compressed into a much smaller volume. The front of the wave slows down as it drags along the seafloor, but the back of the wave, still in deeper water, continues to travel at high speed, catching up. This causes the water to pile up. The wave's speed decreases, but its height, its amplitude, begins to grow dramatically. The gentle 1-meter swell in the deep ocean can transform into a towering wall of water 10, 20, or even 30 meters high as it reaches the shore. It is not a normal, breaking wave. It is a rapid, powerful surge, a fast-moving tide that does not retreat, but continues to push inland, carrying with it the deep, ancient energy of the earthquake that gave it birth. The moment the Great Fault ruptures deep beneath the ocean floor, the story of the earthquake splits into two. The first story is one of physical destruction, of seismic waves shaking the ground and displacing the sea. The second, and for our modern world, more important story, is one of information. It is a story that moves not at the speed of a sound wave through rock, but at the speed of light. This is the story of the first Sentinels, the silent, sleepless guardians that are always listening to the planet's heartbeat. Scattered across the globe, in quiet university basements, in remote field stations, and in deep, stable boreholes, is a vast, interconnected web of thousands of seismometers. These are the sensitive ears of our planet. They are not waiting for an earthquake to happen. They are in a state of constant, patient listening, recording every tiny tremor, every distant rumble, every subtle vibration that passes through the Earth's crust. Most of the time, they record only the quiet background noise of the planet, the crashing of distant ocean waves, the whisper of the wind through trees, the faint hum of human activity. But on July 16th, at 12:37 p.m. Alaskan time, these instruments received a new and powerful message. The first signals to arrive were the P waves, the primary waves, racing outwards from the epicenter. Traveling at several kilometers per second, they were the first heralds of the rupture, the first whisper of the immense energy that had been unleashed. A seismometer in central Alaska would have been the first to register the signal, its delicate needle, or its digital equivalent, suddenly leaping from a quiet line into a sharp, jagged spike. But the message did not stop there. Within minutes, that same P wave, having traveled through the body of the planet, reached seismometers across North America, in California, in Colorado, in Texas. A few minutes later, it arrived in Japan, in Europe, in Antarctica. The entire global network of seismometers vibrated in response, a silent chorus announcing the event. And as each station received this signal, its data was instantly and automatically transmitted via satellite and fiber optic cables to data centers and tsunami warning centers around the world. This is the crucial advantage of modern science. The seismic waves themselves, as fast as they are still bound by the speed of sound through rock. But the information about those waves travels at the speed of light. Before the slower, more destructive S-waves had even finished shaking the Alaskan coast, scientists thousands of kilometers away already knew that a major earthquake had occurred. They knew its location, its depth, and they were already beginning to calculate its magnitude. The first Sentinels had sounded the alarm, and the great race against time, the race between information and the ocean wave itself, had begun. The first signals from the global seismic network arrived not as a sound, but as a silent torrent of data, flooding into the nerve centers of the world's tsunami warning system. At hubs like the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, this is the moment the second phase of the Great Race begins. The challenge is no longer just to detect the earthquake, but to understand it, to model its consequences, and to do so in minutes before a potential wave can reach the nearest coast. This is a race run not by humans, but by supercomputers. These are not ordinary machines. They are powerful analytical engines, the quiet, digital brains of the entire warning system. The moment the seismic data arrives, their complex algorithms spring into action. Their first task is to solve a puzzle of time and distance. By comparing the precise arrival times of the P waves at dozens of different seismometers around the globe, they can triangulate the earthquake's point of origin, its epicenter, with incredible precision. They pinpoint it to a remote location on the floor of the North Pacific, south of the Alaskan Peninsula. Simultaneously, they analyze the amplitude and frequency of the seismic waves to calculate the earthquake's magnitude and depth. The numbers confirm the initial fears, a magnitude of 7.3, a powerful event by any measure. And crucially, the depth is shallow, only about 20 kilometers beneath the seafloor. This is a critical piece of information. A deep earthquake expends most of its energy shaking the rock within the earth. But a shallow earthquake, especially a megathrust event, is far more efficient at displacing the seafloor, and therefore, the ocean above it. With these key parameters location, magnitude, and depth now known, the supercomputers perform their most important task. They run a series of complex models, simulations of what might happen next. These models are built on decades of scientific knowledge. They contain detailed maps of the ocean floor's topography. They understand the physics of how water moves. And they have a vast library of historical data from thousands of previous earthquakes. The computer asks a series of rapid-fire questions. Given an earthquake of this magnitude, at this depth, in this specific subduction zone, what is the probability that it has generated a tsunami? And if so, How large might that wave be, and in which direction will it travel? The initial results, based on the sheer power of the 7.3 magnitude quake in a known tsunami-generating region, are unequivocal. The risk is high. The models show that a significant tsunami is a distinct possibility, and in this race against time, there is no room for hesitation. The system is designed to err on the side of caution. Based on this initial, model-based threat assessment, the first tsunami warning is issued. Sirens are activated, alerts are sent. The human part of the system, the emergency responders and the coastal communities, begins to react. But for the scientists and the supercomputers, this is only the beginning. The warning is based on a prediction, an educated guess. Now, they need confirmation. They need real-world data from the ocean itself. And so, they turn their attention from the seismic waves traveling through the earth to the silent sentinels waiting patiently in the deep ocean, the dart buoys, hoping to hear their crucial, and hopefully quiet, report. The initial tsunami warning, triggered by the violent shaking of the earth and the rapid calculations of supercomputers, is a necessary precaution. It is an alarm bell based on a powerful prediction, a model of what could happen. But a model is not the same as a measurement. To know for certain if a destructive wave is truly racing across the ocean, scientists must turn from the seismic echoes traveling through the rock to the ocean itself. They must listen for a direct report from the deep. This is the task of the most remarkable and crucial part of our global tsunami defense system, the silent sentinels of the deep ocean. These sentinels are a network of advanced buoys known as the DART system, which stands for Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis. They are not ordinary weather buoys, bobbing in coastal waters. They are sophisticated, two-part instruments, deployed in the vast, deep ocean, often thousands of kilometers from any shore. They sit patiently, sometimes for years, in a state of quiet listening, waiting for the faint, passing signature of a tsunami. The first part of the system, its ears, rests in the profound silence and darkness of the abyssal plain, on the very floor of the ocean. This is the bottom pressure recorder, or BPR. It is an incredibly sensitive instrument, designed to do one thing with astonishing precision: measure the weight of the water above it. It constantly monitors the pressure exerted by the entire column of water that stretches for thousands of meters from the seafloor to the surface. In the deep ocean, a tsunami is not a towering wall of water. It is a low, broad swell, often no more than a few centimeters high, but its wavelength can be hundreds of kilometers long. A ship on the surface would not even notice it pass, but the BPR can feel it. As the immense volume of water that makes up the tsunami wave passes over the BPR, it momentarily increases the height of the entire water column by a tiny amount. This adds a minuscule but measurable amount of extra weight, a slight increase in pressure on the seafloor. The BPR is sensitive enough to detect a change in water pressure equivalent to the thickness of a single sheet of paper. When the BPR's internal computer detects such a pressure change that matches the signature of a tsunami, it awakens from its slumber. It converts this data into an acoustic signal, a coded message sent not as a radio wave, which cannot travel far through water, but as sound, like a deep, robotic whale song. This acoustic message travels upwards through thousands of meters of cold, dark water to the second part of the system, the surface buoy. This surface buoy, a bright and lonely sentinel floating in the middle of the ocean, is the system's voice. It receives the acoustic message from the seafloor below, and its onboard computer immediately relays this data to a satellite high in orbit. The satellite then beams the information back down to the tsunami warning centers on Earth. This entire process, from the seafloor to the scientist's computer screen, happens in a matter of minutes. It is a technological marvel, a conversation between the abyss and the sky, and on the day of the Alaskan earthquake, this is the conversation the entire world was waiting for. In the tense minutes following the earthquake and the initial tsunami warning, a quiet and focused drama unfolds in the control rooms of the tsunami warning centers. Here, seismologists and oceanographers are gathered around their screens, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of data. The initial warning has been issued based on the powerful seismic models, a necessary and responsible precaution, but now they are waiting for ground truth. They are waiting for a message from the deep, a definitive report from the silent sentinels of the Dart buoy network. The system is designed for this very moment. The buoys closest to the earthquake's epicenter are the most critical witnesses. They are the ones that a newly formed tsunami wave would reach first, long before it could ever reach a populated coastline. The supercomputers have already calculated the predicted arrival time of the first wave at these specific buoy locations. And so, the scientists wait. The minutes tick by, each one filled with a quiet, professional tension. They are watching the data streams from these specific buoys, waiting for a change. If a significant tsunami had been generated, the data plot from the bottom pressure recorder would show a distinct and unmistakable signature. They would see a long, slow rise in the measured water pressure as the crest of the great wave passed over, followed by a corresponding drop as the trough went by. It would be a clear, unambiguous signal, a message from the abyss that a wave of immense energy was on its way. But on this day, the signal that arrived was one of profound and beautiful silence. The data from the Dart buoys closest to the epicenter streamed in, and the line on the graph remained flat. There was no sudden rise in pressure, no long, slow swell. There was only the normal, gentle noise of the deep ocean, the background hum of tides and currents. The buoys were shouting, in the clear and certain language of data, that nothing was coming. The great upward thrust of the seafloor, as violent as it was, had not been efficient in displacing the immense column of water above it. The earthquake had roared, but the ocean had not answered in kind. This is the moment of truth, the turning point in the race against time. With this direct, real-world data from the ocean itself, the scientists can now act with confidence. The models had predicted a threat, but the ocean has reported that the threat has not materialized. The ghost wave that existed in the computer simulations was not real, and so, the decision is made. The initial tsunami warning, which had sent coastal communities scrambling for higher ground, is officially downgraded to an advisory. And then, a short time later, as more data confirms the quiet state of the sea, the advisory is cancelled entirely. A collective planetary sigh of relief is breathed. A catastrophe has been averted. And now, with the immediate danger past, the work of the scientists shifts from warning to understanding, as they begin to ask the next crucial question: why? Why did an earthquake this powerful fail to create the destructive wave that the models had feared? The silent report from the Dart buoys is the most crucial piece of evidence in the moments after a potential tsunami-generating earthquake. The seismic data tells us what the Earth's crust did. The computer models tell us what the ocean might do as a result. But the data from the bottom pressure recorders on the sea floor tells us what the ocean is doing, right now. It is the ground truth, the final and most reliable witness. And in the case of the July 16th earthquake, that witness reported a quiet sea. In the control room of the Tsunami Warning Center, this negative signal is just as important as a positive one. It allows the scientists to move from a state of cautious prediction to one of confident assessment. The initial models, based on the earthquake's immense 7.3 magnitude and its shallow depth in a dangerous subduction zone, were correct to issue a warning. The potential for a destructive wave was very real, and the first duty of the system is to ensure public safety by providing the earliest possible alert. It is always better to warn for a wave that does not arrive than to fail to warn for one that does. But now, with direct, real-time data from the ocean itself, the story changes. The scientists can see that the immense energy released by the earthquake, for reasons we will explore, did not efficiently transfer into the water column. The great upward thrust of the seafloor was not significant enough to create the large-scale displacement needed to generate a dangerous, ocean-spanning wave. The models provided the possibility. The ocean provided the reality. With this new, high-confidence data in hand, the decision is made. The initial, urgent tsunami warning is officially downgraded to a tsunami advisory. This is a critical change in language and meaning. A warning means a dangerous, inundating wave is imminent or expected, and that people in the warning area should evacuate immediately. An advisory means that a tsunami with the potential for strong currents or waves dangerous to those in or very near the water is expected, but that widespread significant inundation is not. People are advised to stay out of the water and away from beaches and harbors, but widespread evacuations are no longer necessary. This decision is communicated instantly across all channels, from emergency broadcast systems to social media. For the coastal communities that had moved to higher ground, it is a signal that the worst of the danger has likely passed, but the watch is not over. The scientists continue to monitor the data from the DART buoys and from coastal tide gauges, watching for any smaller, trailing waves or unusual currents. And finally, after about 2 hours have passed since the initial earthquake, with no significant wave activity detected anywhere in the region, the final decision is made. The tsunami advisory is canceled. The event is over. The system has worked perfectly. It is a beautiful symphony of science and technology, a process that moves from the brute force of a geological rupture to the elegant mathematics of predictive modeling, to the quiet, precise measurement of a deep-sea sensor, and finally, to a calm, informed decision that protects lives while preventing unnecessary and prolonged panic. The sirens have fallen silent. The warnings have been canceled. A great earthquake has struck, but the feared tsunami never arrived. This leaves us with a final, crucial question that the scientists in the warning centers begin to ask as soon as the immediate danger has passed. Why? Why did an earthquake of this magnitude, a powerful 7.3 rupture in one of the most dangerous subduction zones on the planet, fail to generate a destructive wave? The answer lies in the complex and unique personality of the earthquake itself, in the specific way the Earth's crust chose to break on that particular day. Not all great earthquakes are created equal. Even within a single subduction zone, the way the fault ruptures can vary dramatically. And this variation is the key to whether a tsunami is born. The most dangerous type of earthquake for tsunami generation is a pure thrust fault event. This is when the overriding continental plate, which has been stuck and compressed, suddenly lurches upwards and outwards, releasing its stored energy in a primarily vertical motion. This upward thrust acts like a colossal paddle, lifting the entire column of ocean water above it and creating the massive, long wavelength displacement that is the perfect recipe for a devastating tsunami. The 1964 Great Alaskan Earthquake was a classic example of this, with enormous sections of the seafloor being thrust upwards by many meters. But there's another type of fault movement. This is known as strike-slip motion. In a strike-slip event, the two plates primarily slide horizontally past one another, rather than vertically. Imagine placing your two hands together and sliding them past each other. There is very little up or down movement. While a strike-slip earthquake can be incredibly powerful and cause intense shaking, it is far less efficient at displacing large volumes of water. It moves the seafloor sideways, not upwards, and therefore does not create the great mound of water needed to generate a significant tsunami. In reality, most large earthquakes in a subduction zone are a complex mixture of both. They have a component of vertical thrust motion and a component of horizontal strike-slip motion. The specific personality of each earthquake is determined by the unique stresses and geometries of that particular section of the fault at that particular time. And the evidence suggests that the July 16th earthquake, while powerful enough to release a tremendous amount of seismic energy, may have had a larger component of horizontal strike-slip motion than vertical thrust motion. It is the difference between pushing the water with the flat of your hand versus slicing through it with the side of your hand. The push, thrust, moves a huge volume of water and creates a great wave. The slice, strike-slip, cuts through the water efficiently, creating ripples and turbulence, but it does not generate a massive propagating wave. On this day, it seems, the Earth's crust chose to slice more than it pushed. This is a matter of geological luck. A future earthquake in the very same region could rupture in a different way, with a much larger vertical component, and produce a truly devastating tsunami. But for this event, the The specific character of the rupture spared the coastlines. It was a powerful roar from the planet, but one that, thankfully, did not raise the sea. The story of the Alaskan earthquake and the tsunami that never was is a story of immense geological power and precise modern technology. But it is also, at its heart, a story of human connection on a planetary scale. The network of seismometers that first detected the rupture and the system of dart buoys that listened to the quiet ocean are not isolated, local systems. They are individual nodes in a vast, global web of scientific cooperation, a system designed to protect not just one coastline, but all coastlines. When the ground shook in Alaska, the information did not just travel to a local warning center. It was instantly shared with scientific institutions across the globe. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Hawaii, a central hub for the entire Pacific Basin, received the same data at the same time. So did centers in Japan, in Chile, and in Australia. In the moments after the quake, scientists and computers thousands of kilometers apart were all working on the same problem, running the same models, and sharing their findings. This is one of the quiet triumphs of modern science. The Earth is divided by borders, by oceans, and by politics, but the data that describes its behavior is shared freely and instantly. A seismic wave does not recognize national boundaries, and neither does the science that tracks it. This global network allows for a level of safety and preparedness that would have been unimaginable just a few generations ago. A warning issued for a potential tsunami in Alaska can trigger watches and advisories for communities as far away as California, Hawaii, or Japan, giving them precious hours to prepare for a wave that is still crossing the deep ocean. Think of it as a great planetary nervous system. The earthquake is a sudden, sharp stimulus at one point on the planet's skin. The seismic network acts as the nerves, transmitting the signal of that stimulus around the world at the speed of light. And the various tsunami warning centers act as the brain, processing the information, assessing the threat, and coordinating a response. It is a system built on a foundation of shared knowledge and mutual trust, a quiet collaboration that works tirelessly in the background of our lives, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It is a testament to what humanity can achieve when we choose to work together to understand and mitigate the powerful forces of the natural world. And so, our journey comes to a close. We began with the violent, 30-second shudder of the Earth off the coast of Alaska, a moment of profound uncertainty that triggered sirens and sent communities scrambling for safety. And from that single, dramatic event, we have traveled to the very heart of the planet and back. We have witnessed the slow, inexorable dance of the great tectonic plates, a collision of continents that has been happening for millions of years. We have stood at the edge of the deep Aleutian Trench, the great scar that marks this ancient conflict. We have felt the immense silent buildup of strain as the plates lock together, and the sudden, violent release of that energy in the form of seismic waves. We have seen how that same energy can displace the ocean, giving birth to a tsunami, a wave of immense power that travels with the speed of a jet plane. But we have also seen the other side of this story. We have seen the quiet, dedicated work of science. We have followed the seismic signals as they raced across the globe, picked up by a network of silent, listening sentinels. We have watched as supercomputers translated these signals into predictions, and as a second network of sentinels, the dart buoys in the deep ocean, provided the ground truth needed to turn a frightening possibility into a calm and certain reality. The story of the Alaskan earthquake is, therefore, a story of two immense forces. The first is the raw, untamed power of the planet itself, a force indifferent to our lives, operating on a timescale we can barely comprehend. The second is the quiet, patient power of human ingenuity, a force that seeks not to control nature, but to understand it, to listen to its rhythms, and to find safety within its powerful embrace. There is nothing to fear from a living planet. The earthquakes and volcanoes are not acts of malice. They are the signs of a dynamic and healthy world, the deep breaths of a system that is constantly remaking itself. And there is nothing to fear from the knowledge of these forces. On the contrary, It is in this knowledge that we can find a profound and lasting peace. The peace that comes from understanding that we are not helpless victims of a chaotic world, but are intelligent observers, capable of listening to the planet's whispers and preparing for its roars. The peace that comes from knowing that even as the ground shakes, there is a global community of scientists working together, sharing data in a quiet, collaborative effort to keep us safe. So as you now let your mind drift into the quiet stillness of the night, let this story be a comfort. The earth will continue its slow, powerful dance. The plates will continue to shift, but we are watching, we are listening, and we are learning. And in that shared, growing understanding, there is a deep and unshakable security. There is peace in knowledge. Sleep well.